your husband was on one of these rescue ships. Great, carry on.
Yes, and it was a really, really traumatic time for him. He was doing 3-week stints, and they were picking bodies out of the sea of babies, women. It was awful. But at the same time, he said they were processing men, adults in their 30s, who all had phones with ISIS stuff on the phones. They were being separated. When they were being handed over to the authorities with the information explaining that these guys, had all this on their phones and what their ages were, and they were just being processed through. There was nothing, they weren't being separated out. They just all went through with everything else. And it broke his heart because he was dealing with families who were in such a terrible state, with young babies who so clearly needed rescuing. And yet you had adult males that were pushing women and children to the back of the queue when they were being triaged to say, I've got a sore throat, I've got a cough, because they felt that they were just more important. And it's just an awful situation. And this was last year. This was happening. And there were hundreds and hundreds of women, children and men that were being picked out of the sea, but not all of them were refugees. And he came home heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken, because he's saying, I don't know how Europe is going to cope. But what more can we do than pass the information on and give the medical care to those who need it? I mean, the men that would push to the front, he would just push off to the side and say, go away. But they were so unhappy with the fact that they weren't being treated first. And it's a cultural difference that is coming across as well, I mean, what kind of human being pushes a woman with a baby aside to say, deal with my cough? And how are we supposed to process that as individuals? He still has images that he has to deal with, over a year later. We forget about the medics that deal with this, the soldiers that are dealing with this, the people that are processing these people. It's not just how are we going to process all these people? It's how are we going to deal with the trauma of having to process these people, having to make these decisions. Who do you treat first?
Jessica,
which baby?
And how is your husband now in terms of how when he sees this, sees the numbers, sees the 44,000 so far, 2017, knowing what he knows, knowing what you know, that there's truly people just trying to help. Sounds like your husband was just wanting to help, but having seen firsthand men pushing women and children out the way, plucking women and children from the water. It seems to me that these women and children, I've heard stories of them being locked in the holds underneath the waterline because that's where they get put. But it seems to me that these women and children are very disposable. They are the disposable humans by these men.
My husband is turning into, it's why I stopped him doing it, he's turning into a man I don't recognise anymore. Because my family think I'm a bleeding heart liberal and, I would just wave everyone in and say, come on, we'll help. And my husband was of a very similar opinion, that people needed help. He's now turning into someone I don't recognise because of what he has physically seen. He is starting to say, this is not all people looking for help. There are people here that are out for their own self-interest. It's almost like flights. They overload the flights and get payments because they know that some people are going to be bumped. He said they are overloading the ships because they know people are going to die. And it's just awful. And now he is building a hatred of a certain demographic that he has been exposed to because he's seen the way they behave. He's seen the way they behave.
And Jessica, that's your husband we're speaking about, who has changed then from being, or is obviously still the same person, but you just said he's becoming someone you don't recognise, a man who went with best intentions to help rescue, but now has a perhaps dislike of a certain group of individuals because he's seen the way these male migrants behave, or at least the way they treat women and children.
Yes, he can't handle the way the women and the children are treated by these men.